It's time. It's time for you to live better.
It's time for you to feel healthier.
It's time for you to live longer.
It's time for you to enjoy your journey.
It's time for you to understand your body and your mind. Thank you so much for joining us on It's Time today. We are your hosts. I'm Linsly Donnelly, your citizen scientist and your longevity expert for midlife women.
And I'm Dr. Jen Wagner, physician and holistic performance expert. Welcome to It's Time, powered by Prosper. Just a quick reminder, the information discussed in this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only. We are not offering medical advice, nor are we entering into any type of physician or clinician relationship with listeners. Always consult your healthcare provider before beginning any new fitness, nutrition, or lifestyle changes to ensure they're right for you. Your health and safety is our priority, and let's keep it that way. Thank you.
So Jen, I'm so excited we have Anissa with us here today. Anissa is one of the people we got to meet through our dear friend, David Stewart. So we get to give credit to him for connecting us through. But, Anissa is going to give us her background story. But the reason why I'm so excited is Anissa is like every woman that you want to be. You know, she was a business leader. She was a serial entrepreneur. And then she kind of jumped out there and did some super exciting things in travel and then trying to get deep in understanding how to help midlife women in menopause because of her own journey. So I think of her as like this aspirational superhero, every woman that we want to be. With that introduction, I'm not going to steal any thunder, Anissa. Tell us your story.
Oh my gosh. First of all, thank you so much. That was a lot. That was overkill for the real, the little story that I have. But thank you. And I think all it really means is that I'm ADHD because I can't seem to stick with one thing for more than 5 or 6 years. But yeah, I have jumped around quite a bit. So I'll go back to not the beginning of time, but really briefly, did spend about 15 years in corporate roles for large companies. And I always reel them off: Procter & Gamble, Sprint, Reebok, Xerox, and Birds Eye Foods. Again, boom, 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 boom. A lot of different industries there. Classic training, learned a lot, was super helpful in terms of understanding how to structure and run a brand. And so that was really helpful to me in terms of anything I wanted to do after that. So sort of at around, maybe mid 30s, I became a little itchy on, sort of being in these large behemoths, because not to say that they stifle creativity. Certainly they have departments for that, but I wasn't in the right space for the way my brain thinks. And so I ended up leaving and starting my own company at the time, which was a nutrition databasing company. And so as daunting as this still feels to me, we sort of went out and started capturing all of the nutrition fact panels for products in the grocery store, putting them into a table. So each one of those fields on the nutrition fact panel, and then writing the FDA algorithms over the top for a lot of the claims like heart healthy, good source of fiber, and then bringing lifestyle claims like gluten-free, lactose intolerant, all those types of things in after. And ultimately with that, I partnered up with the largest shelf tag printer in the industry, a company called Vestcom. And Vestcom basically takes in over a billion sort of price changes and, all these things that go on little unit price labels every week. Crazy amount. Think about Kroger has 2,400 grocery stores, and every single product in the grocery store, promotion. Totally. You go to the yogurt aisle and you see these little shelf tags that say 4 for 1 or something like that. So all of that is a company called Vestcom. So it's all outsourced for these large, behemoth retailers. So anyway, long story short, I went to work, and Vestcom actually acquired my company, and I went to work for them, really heading up health and wellness, which was kind of a whole new thing for them because they had primarily just been a printer. So I was really their first, they would call it data integration, which was really, really amazing. It was the right time. It was a very early 2000s when, Whole Foods was kind of coming onto the scene really heavy and was getting a lot of positive press around, what they were doing in the organic space. And so coming in with a database that can kind of help consumers identify better choices at the shelf edge was very, very topical at the moment. So spent a lot of time working with large retailers, putting individual programs for them in place. And ultimately even got to go to the White House in the Obama administration and meet with the Obama's personal chef, Sam Cass. And he was heading up, working with Michelle on the Let's Move program.
Right.
So I felt like I was it. That was my moment.
Yes. Yes, that is
cool.
great.
Just kidding. So that was really, really rewarding to just be involved in a pivotal stage of feeling like I could maybe help people be more conscious of what was on their cereal aisle, their yogurt
You
aisle.
bet. Yeah.
Hard to choose categories.
Yeah.
During that time frame, unfortunately, my mom was diagnosed with dementia. And I was on planes every week. I was literally like never home. And so I decided to actually leave that job because I really felt at that point, I felt like I had done everything I could do. We had started working on a supplement database. So the food was done. We kind of started going down that path of, again, trying to identify better choices in the supplement aisle because it's overwhelming, right? Nobody can understand how to choose a supplement. So started that and maybe could have stayed and worked a little more dutifully on that. But ultimately with my mom, I just felt like it was time to move on. So got off planes, planted my feet on the ground and started a fitness studio in Rochester, New York, which is where my parents were. It was cold.
We have
And that fitness studio had fresh prepared meals, health coaching, and high intensity training under one roof. So that was, I didn't know it at the time, but kind of a precursor to some of the things I'm doing now, because I was able to work with trainers and our customers to actually build teams to go compete in events. And that was just the beginning of a great learning of, the whole idea of community and accountability for exercise, motivation. Just incredible retention, incredible motivation to come to the classes and stay engaged for long periods until, ultimately we'd go off and undertake the event together as a team. It was so much fun. So I had a good time doing that. But during that period, my mom passed away. And then my dad passed away just a couple months after my mom. And so both of them passing at the same time as I was unfortunately going through some challenges in my relationship. So I had been married for several years and we had decided to separate and we ultimately decided to divorce. So kind of basically like lost my parents. So lost the role of daughter, lost the role of wife, and then decided to exit the business. We sold that company and I then no longer was really anything. It's like,
Yes, I think it was Chip Conley who called that life quakes. He's like, you have a life quake. And that's like 3 right there. Life quakes. Big ones.
Right. All like in, 8 months. So, which is ironic because this is a sidebar, but I just got off a call with one of my very best girlfriends. And this is just a validation that we know this goes on, but she's my age, so 57, and she just sent her last daughter off to college. And it's such a textbook, right? She's like, this today literally says to me, like, I just don't know what I'm here to do, what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm like, I know, I get it. I was just 10 years early on it, I guess.
Welcome to the phase. Welcome. We've got room. We got room for you.
I had the answers. I don't, you know what I mean? We've kind of worked through a lot, but everybody's different and everybody goes through these in different pieces and at different times. But anyway, with me, ultimately sold that company. And that's where really life took a massive pivotal, like hockey stick. And I went from, all of this sort of workaholism and, loving what I was doing, but working a lot of hours to completely letting that go and moving into the physical realm of life and undertaking training and travel and extreme adventure. And again, just in a minimalist way. So my lifestyle went from, and I was just talking about this the other day to somebody because it struck me. We think about our lives and, on a daily basis, usually there's some level of consistency across each day. Maybe not so much with you guys, because I know you're all over the place with what you're doing. We're a little, all of us are a little bit on the oddball side, but most people kind of get up and have a similar breakfast and do similar things, sit at their computer and, get some emails out and then have lunch and whatever. And in my life at that time, it had been, getting on a plane. So I was always in first class not because I was paying a lot of money, but because I had all these miles racked up. So I was always bumped up. I was always, getting off planes, going to the President's Circle for Hertz Club, going to the Marriott where the Wi-Fi was, but everything was as expected and very controllable. And so when I transitioned into this sort of travel, this global, I haven't mentioned half of it, but global travel. So going to third world countries. My first was South Africa, which, we could argue third world, I guess. But starting in South Africa, very different culture, very different lifestyle, no rental cars, literally living with my bike, my backpack, and, finding laundromats in grocery stores. Pivotal change because
That's radical. I mean,
well,
you're
was.
like 50, right? You're getting
I
out
was
there.
47 when I started.
Okay, 47. So you're just jumping out from, I don't want to say cushion because it's like, it's hard work to travel, but it's pretty cushy corporate America, startups, cushy life to here's my knapsack.
And familiar life, right? Like, I know where my grocery store is. I know where my gym is. I know where this is. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know what currency I'm using today.
Right. I know the language. I can communicate with people.
South Africa was easy because of that.
Yes.
But later years, I went to some crazy places, and just all of that moving all the time, it was a lot of change going on all through. So, and I was also jumping into a lifestyle for me. And I think you'll both appreciate this. I know you're both extremely athletic, but I was, working toward my first full Ironman. And so, I felt like I was a pro athlete, and I am no special, phenomenal athlete at the time. I mean, I've learned a lot since then, but I didn't even really know how to change a tire on a bike. And I'm literally riding 80 miles and coming back and then going to the gym and, getting a swim in and, trying to find a grocery store and do my laundry for the next day and get all the food ready for the next day in an environment where I didn't even know really the foods. It's not like you walk into a South African grocery store and you're like, oh, well, there's my trail mix that I'm going to take and my power bars. Like, no.
Yeah.
What is this food? Is this gonna work on a bike ride? So it was really very life-changing. In a very, at the time, in a stressful way. It was hard because I really didn't know what to expect. That wasn't the reason I did it. I didn't realize I needed this life change. It was more because I was very excited about the physical training and about challenging myself in a different way. I just didn't expect all of the other change in life and how really honestly much more challenging everything else became because of all these other pieces. In the long run, it was phenomenal because the learnings coming out of that kind of transition in life can be, can be obviously very impactful for life, decisions down the road.
Right.
For now, for example, I just don't need the same types of things I needed 20 years ago.
Yeah.
I'm very minimalist in the way I live. My expectations are not what they used to be. I don't mind flying. I always call it cattle car now. I'm kind of like, worst seat on the plane, lowest price is fine with me.
Yeah.
They used to throw fits about, I didn't really throw fits. You have that attitude. Are you kidding me? I'm in the middle seat. Now I'm like, I have a seat. Perfect.
Yeah.
So I think gratitude kind of comes out of that, especially as Americans or any of our, sort of first world countries. We have so much, and until it's taken away from you, you may not really realize what you have. So there was that. So I did that for several years. The real outcome of that to me was coming back. I call it coming back after a couple of years of this. And at 51 years old at the time, seeing a lot of my girlfriends were going through, having the 50th birthday parties, and we're all getting together, and we've known each other for 25, 30 years. And everybody was sort of complaining or unhappy about what was going on with their bodies, just not comfortable, not happy. Like, what do I do about this? And I felt like, holy cow, wow, I'm feeling fantastic. I'm feeling the best I've ever felt in my life at 50 years old. And I remember this vividly. I just found it the other day, as a matter of fact. I had a VO2 max report. And at the time, my VO2 max was 57. And I was 50 years old. And, I was a pro athlete, that would be normal. But I was just some, corporate tech who decided to go get on a bike for a few years. And it was, well, look at the impact this had on my body.
Yeah. And I mean, time out on this because I don't know that everybody understands what you just said, right? So a VO2 max, a 57 percentile, probably puts you in the top 3%. It's pretty high.
It's really high.
Well, I remember seeing the tables online. I was curious and I looked, and I think the rating was sort of superior for 25.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, right.
Yeah. I mean, just for context, I'm not a super duper athlete either, but I think I'm 38 or 39%. So that's massive.
And I am now, you know what I mean? That was a period in life where that's all I did. Literally, I was probably working out 25, 30 hours a week. Then when I wasn't working out in an actual training plan, I would be walking 10 miles, down a hill to go to the grocery store and do my laundry. And just movement was never ending. And that in and of itself, I remember also I leaned down and, I am not there now, but I was at 16% body fat at the time that I did this.
Yeah.
So, the takeaway to me is, again, I am not some, all-American athlete from college and no, this is just my lifestyle. This was something completely, different for me in my, human bodily form. And yet I was able to achieve some pretty amazing things over time in terms of just my speed, my strength,
Right.
some of the, mountains I've summited that, I've learned over time over time we almost have like a muscle memory in our brains for altitude. So, can kind of walk up over a 20,000-foot mountain these days. And it's interesting to me that our bodies really don't have to decline as much as we think that they do.
Yeah.
It's two things. I think it's society kind of tells us this, oh, you're a 50-year-old woman. Oh, that's rough. You've come through menopause and, it's not going to get any better from here. And then, some of the science suggests, okay, well, you're losing 1% of VO2 max a year. You're losing 1% of muscle mass a year if you're lucky. And now you guys know this. And I thank you for spreading the word, and for all of us, I think, who are kind of trying to do the same thing, which is help women understand and appreciate that you can counteract this stuff with some simple lifestyle choices, supplementation in some cases.
Yes.
So yeah, I'll talk.
And I know, and I know we're going to get to that. That's what you're doing now. And I appreciate you giving us all that context, because I feel like for so many of us, you don't have to go hike the Himalayas to change your body type at 50. You don't have to be doing sprints and train for Ironman, but you can change your body at 50. And if you do want to do epic level physical fitness, it's not too late. So I think that's what your example is. Recalibrated all that. And we're going to talk about your initiatives in that to put that learning to work so that it's accessible for people who only have 45 minutes a day, max, four times a week, to get the similar level of recalibration in their physical fitness. But it's a mind bender to be like, wow, the days of doing big adventures are not at all over just because you've hit the 50s or whatever the next decade is that you might be tapping on. So that is a great point to pause and tell us a little bit about your two areas of work with midlife women now.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so kind of coming through this, I tend to be a researcher. I think we all are here.
Yeah,
like
right.
digging in once something happens. And so it just so happened it was about the time that Dr. Stacy Sims launched her book, Roar. And so I found that book. It was 2018. I actually met Stacy at the Female Athletes Conference that Jen Ackerman holds.
Yep.
My brain's not functioning today. And so in 2018, I kind of started going down this path of digging into the science behind hormone decline, and understanding again what, Stacy started suggesting. And I think there's many other studies behind it in terms of what we can do, both from a nutrition standpoint as well as a fitness standpoint. And then of course, supplementation. And from that, I started building out this lifestyle program that really, what I would call is very prescriptive. So the goal was, and I found this in my consumer work years before in the nutrition side, I think people are very confused by the media. There's so much out there with regard to nutrition. One day it's keto, and the next it's paleo, and then it's intermittent fasting, and then it's, the fish diet or whatever. And so the reality is, I think people do better if you give them a pretty, specific prescribed suggested idea of what they can do. And so for me, that was really taking the macros. I mean, it's not rocket science, but it's easy to understand. Taking that 40-30-30 profile, 40% carbs, 30% protein, 30% fat, and then with a 70% front load, so more calories earlier in the day, evenly dosing aminos, front loading carbs. I mean, it's really kind of an algorithm, but taking that algorithm and putting that into an app where a woman can go in and put in her height, weight, age, activity level, hormone status, and know, okay, for me, at 5'6" and 127 pounds, I need 42 grams of protein for breakfast and 13 grams of fat and yada, yada, yada. And so starting down that path of really helping women really have a very conscious choice for how to shift their diet. Same thing with the fitness, with strength training and HIIT training, of getting that heart rate up and educating them on what that means. Like, what is your max heart rate? And then the supplementation piece, again, trying to stay focused on what has evidentiary science behind it. So the creatines and the ashwagandhas and the things that have studies with menopausal women and, have actual clinical data to say this this is effective. So that's kind of where I started with the program. And then I've moved that into working in a couple of things. One is regenerative medicine. So working with the GLPs for one, in terms of what they can do to help women move the needle in this phase when they feel stuck with the hormone shifts, a lot of inflammation, obviously a shift in body composition. And so sometimes those GLP-1s can help to kickstart the weight losses. And then, we complement that with some strength training to make sure that we're maintaining muscle mass, but kind of going down that path of helping women regain what I would say is confidence, in their bodies as they're aging. And then the other piece of the business, so to be clear, it's kind of the one side is sort of lifestyle and, body confidence or body composition changing. And the other piece of that is then figuring out, well, what do I do with this body? What is it that I want to do? And that's the adventure travel side of things. We have Patagonia, first 5 months of next year, I think we've got Patagonia, Kilimanjaro, Camino de Santiago, and then a couple of rim to rims. And so just kind of, getting up there to really test that new body, right? And see what you can do.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love how they're coupled. Like we're going to get you this, but there's like this super cool reward for doing.
Thank you. Thanks. It's fun. It's fun to watch, especially people or women. And I say people because I actually have one co-ed trip because some of the women who went with me this year want to bring their spouses on a trip next year. And so what's just so fun and rewarding is seeing people go for the first time for like a 5-day trek and just not believing that they could do it. And then they do it. And it's so emotional.
Yeah.
Just realize. And I had the same effect when I first started doing this several years ago. So I understand. And that's why I think I have such passion for the adventure side is it really does change your self-image, your belief in what you can do. And especially at this age when everybody else is like, you shouldn't do that. You're too old. What are you thinking? You're crazy. And I've met, 85-year-old women now out on mountains and I'm like, you go girl. Like, I want to be you.
Yes. Yeah. That is fantastic to have that kind of an example.
Yeah.
So, the adventure travel is, just the big bonus for taking care of your physical fitness so that you can go do that adventure travel. When you talk a little bit about the GLPs, again, I know this gets a lot of play in the media, but it might be helpful just to pause for a minute and say, what is that? Like, are we talking peptides? Is it just the Ozempics? Like, what are the products you think are part of your practice with women that you work with in concert with lifestyle levers, like nutrition changes, macro changes, workout changes? How are some of those products characterized and kind of definitionally, what does it mean? Okay. Okay, so as you're talking about all of this, I think, one of the things we're trying to make sure people understand what these words mean. You talked about the GLP-1s and regenerative medicine. What are some of the products that people might be trying to learn more about to use in tandem, in concert with the lifestyle levers like nutrition, macros, lift heavy, HIIT training? What is that product category and how can people start to filter through the options that are out there?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. I think we're living in a really interesting time where we're learning more and more about regenerative medicine, about the function of peptides in our bodies. And we also, at the same time, are learning a lot more about what happens to women as estrogen, progesterone, testosterone start declining. So for one, I think we know that body composition changes pretty dramatically. Mm-hmm. And for women, and I think this is intuitive to us, but maybe not to the men who might listen, we go off a cliff. We really lose those hormones quickly, whereas they've got a benefit, of course, right? We know men always get the benefits with healthcare always. They're taking the gradual slide. And so what that means is, and I think we all have friends, we've seen this happen where we all get this little sort of piddle. It's like this little muffin top arrived. So you're like, where did this come from? And that's a mix of things, so that's the combination of, estrogen not doing its job anymore of helping us maintain that same level of muscle mass. So we're losing that muscle mass. And unfortunately, that's if we're not doing anything to counteract that, i.e. doing any strength training, that will turn into visceral fat, which is the kind of fat that we don't want to have, which can trigger those later life chronic conditions, the heart disease, the diabetes, those types of things. So that's kind of the first thing that happens. And in terms of where we go with that from a supplementation or a medication standpoint is, looking at peptides and their function in this area. And so the things like semaglutide and tirzepatide, GLP-1 or agonists, what they can help us do is they can help us basically lose weight, lose fat. They don't necessarily help us in the muscle mass department. Well, those particular peptides don't, but they help us with weight loss. And that weight loss has a lot of other benefits to it, i.e. bringing down blood sugar levels, bringing down blood pressure levels, which overall helps our heart, right? Helps our heart to have to work less, which overall will help our health. So there's a lot of benefits that come from taking that first step if you've got some extra weight on to lose that weight first. And then there's other peptides. One is called sermorelin, which can actually help to stimulate human growth hormone that's already kind of somewhat stimulated in your body. But as we age, we lose, less of it. It's putting less of it into our body. So if you use something like a sermorelin, it can help you to stimulate a little more HGH, which can help you to grow, helps to improve your growth and your retention of your muscle mass, which is what we want when we're at this age. So those are two biggies that we kind of work with women on in terms of body composition. And why is body composition so important? I really want to emphasize this is not 100% about aesthetics. It's not about, the jeans and the bikinis and all the things we want to wear. It's truly about your health. And so many different aspects of this are becoming much more critically important. Like, for example, we know now that science is showing us that retention of muscle mass is an indicator for longevity. So,
Right.
It's not just like, how great do I look in my clothes? It's okay, how long am I going to live, or how healthy am I going to be? What's my quality of life going to be if I don't retain this muscle? So we really focus on strength. It's, it's an important aspect as we age. And I know you know that.
Well, I have also heard, so you talked about there's body composition, which is weight loss and combination of muscle addition. But it seems like when you go out and read about the different opportunities are there, and we should just be underscoring and exclamation pointing, saying this is with doctor's oversight. This is not Dr. Google. This is, you're working with your medical practitioners with whom you partner. That there are also ways to think about energy, sleep, sex drive, all the other things that get a little bit of a challenge in midlife.
Yes.
And we don't really know what to do. We kind of just, you land in this area of, oh my goodness, everything's changed. Where do I start? And once you start taking a big examination of what's going on in your life, all of it's up for grabs.
Great point. First of all, I think I thank you for saying you're absolutely right that I work with a network of physicians to prescribe any of the peptides that we're talking about. So I myself am not a medical practitioner, nor should I be giving advice along these lines. I'm just sharing, things that I know have worked based on other people's sort of prescriptions and diagnoses that are my clients. But we work on the lifestyle, and then we have a physician who helps with the medical side of things. But you're absolutely right. And I think, Linsly, to your point, the first thing I would do, first and foremost, is what I would say food first, right? How can we fix any of these issues with your diet, with, your exercise? Like, how do we help with the sleep or with the energy management or with, sexual well-being? If that doesn't work, then I always like to move next to sort of a non-prescriptive supplement. And so in cases like sleep, of course, trying the valerian root or trying, tart cherry juice or some of the other recommendations that can help with melatonin and kind of help with better sleep quality. As an example, I would start there before making that third leap, which might be to the peptides, because there are peptides that can address almost anything that happens. So yes, there's specifically peptides that can address that. But I think we'd all agree none of us are here to take multiple injections of different peptides all week long. But some of these symptoms are pretty severe, and loss of sleep, as we all know, is a very big deal, not just for how you feel, but just for your health. And so if that is an issue, we want to take corrective measures in whatever form they have to take. And so, yeah, we definitely do some work in that area as well. Sexual well-being, energy enhancement, we'll call it longevity, which is a whole, I'm sure we're all on the same page. not really a definition, but, I think one that seems to be evolving lately because there's been more conversation about it. But the idea of, cellular or mitochondrial optimization, I guess, seems to be on the docket for the longevity comment. So, but we work in that area.
Where do you see hormones fitting in here?
That's a great.
If we're talking about supplementation and kind of targeting more symptom management, when the symptoms tend to be from lack of hormones, like where do you, in your practice, do you work with a physician or provider to bring hormones in?
Yeah, thank you, Jen. That's a great question. I actually, if I'm going down my little spectrum of like food first and, lifestyle choices, I would put hormones before I would put peptides. I would absolutely encourage a woman to have that conversation either with our OBGYNs in our network or with their own. But I absolutely know firsthand and have seen a lot of women start off with some estrogen, progesterone, and then even testosterone and feel so much better, especially energy wise. It seems like it's a big energy enhancer, everything, right? Visceral fat. I mean, there's a lot of positives that come out of that. So I'm right there with you. I would move there before I would take a more extreme measure.
Is there anything else that I think, and just if we look back in your arc over time, you have been on the forefront of so much of this wellness and taking care of your whole self. To put together and codify a database of nutrition labeling 20 plus years ago was a ton of foresight. And thinking about the Misogi, that's a buzzword now for the, adventure travel. That's what you have pioneered. And then also here, when we first started to get to know each other a year and a half ago, the work that you're doing in the GLP-1s and the other categories seemed relatively, cutting edge / fringe, right? And now it's become very mainstream in the conversation. Is there anything that you're seeing on your radar that is now seeming, a little cutting edge, but you look at it and go, I bet this is going to be mainstream in a couple of years, and it might be a good idea for midlife women to hear about it or to research it or to talk about it with their partnered medical practitioner?
Boy, Linsly.
It's okay to say no, but I'm curious. Like, wait a minute. And this is looking at some stuff. What do you think is out there?
I don't think I'm not probably going to have a super cutting edge idea for you. I do think where I'll use Peter Attia's term. Well, there's a couple things. I think where he's gone with the centenarian decathlon, the idea of a longevity plan.
Right.
I've said before, we write retirement plans and we're always thinking about, our kids' college education, and we're always thinking far out for other things in our life, but we don't tend to do that for our health. We don't plan our health. And I think some of that is because there's always this presumption that it's out of our control. I think, what we're finding now, and I am not a researcher, I do not know the truth to this, but everything I read says genetics are such a much smaller part of our overall health than we've ever been led to believe. Everybody wants to think oh, well, it's not on my control. It's, 80% genetics. And, I think the good news is it's not. Yeah. So certainly there's cases, unfortunately, we've got markers for things in our health and our background. And yes, they may come to fruition, but there's so much more that we can do to control, that longer term outcome. So I think that longevity planning is coming into its own right now. And I see that continuing in my mind. And then I think the idea of precision medicine is another biggie because, again, not a new term, not a new concept, but I think it hasn't really hit mainstream 100% yet.
Yeah. So, what is it? I don't know that term. What is precision medicine?
Sort of almost like one-to-one medicine. So knowing, and Jen's the better one to explain this than I am. Yeah. I'm sitting here with a phenomenal physician on the phone trying to explain some medical term. Not a good idea.
You're spot on. You're doing great. You're doing great. Keep going.
We're here now. Jen, what would you say?
I think that's exactly it, right? It's becoming what does Linsly need? What does Anissa need? And based on genetics, epigenetics, goals, where you are in life, etc. And so it's very personalized.
Okay.
And targeting and a lot of data, targeting very specific things.
Okay. And I think if we can, again, it's kind of where the longevity clinics are going right now, is writing these customized plans. And I think medicine obviously will follow that it's one-to-one. It's like, okay, well, Jen's DNA is blah, blah, blah. And, so we've got to tailor medicine to Jen's specific issue and having a lot higher incidence of success when they do that, obviously. Right.
Yeah. I mean, it's down to you metabolize this drug like this. So we're going to treat you with this instead of what we treat 95% of the other population with.
Okay.
So it's like knowing those really intricate details. That is a combination of genetics, environment, all of it put together.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of what else is, I don't know. I'll have to come back to you on this one.
Yeah.
Where's the universe going?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, this is a little bit of a tangent too, but I think about all the places where you have traveled. And one of the things that our mutual friend, David Stewart, kind of put in my head for longevity planning was to make sure that you pick a place that has a really good trauma center, level 1 trauma center for health. Because as you get older, you got to be quick access to a level 1 trauma center. And so we are, Jen and I are here in Park City, Salt Lake City, I think checks that box. Is that right, Jen? I think so. And I'm sure in Tucson, as well. But as you travel around the world, that's a bigger question. Are there any things on your radar in terms of countries around the world when you're out there traveling that you think are great from a medical infrastructure, and then other countries where you say, do this one early in your travels because they may not have that level 1 facility when you're there and you're 80 years old. I mean, obviously third world.
Can't say that fortunately, knock on wood, I have not tested a lot of the medical facilities overseas.
Yes.
Thank you. But what I would say is it does hit my radar screen as I take groups in thinking about, I mean, you don't even have to go overseas. You go to the Grand Canyon, and this is, it's probably a little bit less critical, but yet if you're at the bottom of the canyon doing a rim to rim run and somebody literally can't make it up, up the side of the mountain to get out, it becomes pretty critical at that point in time. And that's not about care. And that's just a, sort of an emergency rescue situation. But I think about those things overseas, always like I'm going to Chile in January with a group and hiking the W Trek and what could happen there and what the facilities look like there. So it's not even just so much the country, it's where you are within it, right? Because certainly if you are in Santiago, big city, I'm sure your care level is pretty good, but you get out into some of these regions, wherever you are in the world. And, if you decide you want to have a remote house someplace, you need to be thinking about that if you're 80 or 85 and, or let's say 100, right? Because I think now
in 14, we're
going to be super robust, right? But yeah, I think as we get older, I mean, I'm even more conscious. Last week, I fell and hit my leg and ended up with stitches and, had to hike back with blood spurting out of my leg for about 5 miles. Just silly stuff like that I can recognize as I get older, I have to be more careful that, any of us, we could break a leg a lot more easily. And so, and you've got to have, like, for example, the trackers, like wearing the trackers on you and, always being able to be located is huge in these environments. I'm getting a little off topic from where you are with, what's medical care like, but, I think there's things you can do, certainly making yourself familiar with how to take care of yourself, like having first aid, just understanding like, okay, I'm out here by myself or even with 1 or 2 other people. And if something happens, you want to be prepared. You want to know what to do. You want to have the tools to be able to do it. And then you want to, if you have to, know who to call and how quickly they can get there. So those are the basics. But I'm with you. Like, I don't think I'm going to be retiring in Tanzania anytime soon.
Yeah. Awesome.
Question for you as we start to kind of wrap up. So let's say I'm a 48-year-old kind of in my perimenopause journey, and I'm not a super active person, but this idea of almost like, so many people choose a really cool thing to do when they turn 50 or they're, and so I'm going to choose this cool thing at 50 or 52, or when I am officially menopausal, I want to do this. How early do you start prepping people to be able to go on your adventures, especially if they're not very active? But I can see like this entire movement of, instead of us like on the beach in La Jolla for somebody's 50th birthday, we are doing things like rim to rim, and so if people start to embrace this lifestyle and maybe don't have access to you, like what kind of runway are we talking about, and how do you kind of move them along? I would just love our audience to know that, this is an option, but we can start to even plan kind of maybe less intense activities, but like do this. My girlfriends do rim to rim every year and it's so great, but like that can be overwhelming, but it can also be really inspiring to say, I'm going to train for this.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's, Jen, I think that was a perfect segue. So thanks. Because we do train and travel. And I actually have a woman who's turning 65 next year and is doing rim to rim with me with her 25-year-old daughter. And I think that's the coolest thing in the world. And so typically, I think it's honestly all individual. So I always have a consultation with somebody who joins one of our trips. I mean, we sit down, we talk about what their current state is, any injuries, any medications, all of those types of things up front.
Okay.
Because it's critical to understand where that person's coming in. And then from there, I will make a recommendation. I do have a trainer background and a health coaching background. So I will make a recommendation for them to start doing some work on their own before we will pick up group meetings, which typically start usually 4 to 5 months out from trip, depending on the intensity of the trip. So going to Kilimanjaro, we're 5 months out from that trip, whereas something like Camino de Santiago, maybe not fair to say because it's definitely taxing. And especially if you're not somebody who's been out doing a lot of walking, our longest day is going to be 16 miles. That's not nothing, right? It's a long day.
Yeah.
So again, I have those conversations up front just to understand. And one more thing to Lindsley's question about, where do you see things going in the future? This is my own idea. So I don't know. I'm trying to make it happen. But I think the idea of us having challenge plans each year, that idea of growth mindset, of, pushing resilience in your life and staying strong. I believe we each should have a challenge plan. And so, Jen, I think you should come do rim to rim with us.
Absolutely.
I want to come. I want to come too. I've never done it.
We actually had an awesome trip planned this summer with our kids, and we had to cancel it like super last minute, like the day before we were supposed to leave. So I was super bummed. But I try to go every year. It's awesome.
Yes, you do. I mean, it's life. That's what life is about. I mean, we get very immersed in our purpose and our jobs and all the things we're doing, but you got to take time to rejuvenate yourself, obviously. So yes, and to keep pushing because, as we know, it's kind of a test, right? It's like you want to make sure I can still do what I did last year, and obviously there'll be a point when we can't. But it's a goal, right? Each year, and I do just as a closing note, I do have this wonderful 84-year-old woman. If you ever want to talk to her, she's amazing. I met her on Mount Wrightson here, which is 10,000 feet here in Tucson, 11-mile hike, very unstable. So not, you're not walking on a path. And this woman's 84 and she does it every year on her birthday to make sure she can still do it. And she wants to do Greece with me next year up in Flagstaff. And I'm like, she's like crazy. She's amazing.
That's awesome. It's awesome. Well, Anissa, we should have mentioned this earlier, but how do people find you? Because I think the combination of all of the ways you help women get their macros in order, their physical fitness in order for the adventures and so on, it lives in one place. Where's
our best place is our website, which is b-untethered.com.
Okay. Is it just the letter B or is it B-E?
Just the letter B.
Okay.
So B and then hyphen, not underscore, but hyphen or dash, untethered.com.
Okay.
Awesome.
Anissa Buckley. That's right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for spending time with us, Anissa. You have been inspiring to date and continue to put a roadmap out there that is inspiring to go after.
Well, same to you guys. I love following you. So thank you for having me.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for spending your time with us here today. If you liked what you heard and you got some tips on how to live better right now and for the long haul, please help us reach more midlife women. Please share and rate and like this show. And we can't wait to continue the dialogue with you on our next episode. Until then, thank you. It's time.